The helicopter's rotors sliced through Caribbean air like whispered secrets, cutting across turquoise waters that sparkled beneath a deceptively peaceful dawn. Below, the luxury yacht Serenity's Edge bobbed gently in international waters, its pristine white hull gleaming against the endless blue. On the upper deck, a woman in designer sunglasses and flowing linen lounged with a crystal glass of mimosa, her dark skin kissed by salt spray and morning light. To any observer, she appeared to be exactly what she seemed, another wealthy vacationer enjoying the fruits of extraordinary success. But something was wrong. The woman's fingers, adorned with rings worth more than most people's homes, drummed against her glass in a pattern too precise, too rhythmic. Her eyes, hidden behind Cartier frames, tracked the horizon with the calculated sweep of someone accustomed to scanning for threats. When her satellite phone buzzed, a military-grade device disguised as a standard smartphone, she answered on the first ring. "This is a secure line," came the voice, crackling with urgency and the unmistakable authority of the Pentagon. "We need to talk." She set down her mimosa without taking another sip. "I'm on vacation, Admiral. 3 months of leave that I earned after Kandahar." Kandahar was nothing compared to this. The Admiral's voice carried weight that made her spine straighten involuntarily. "We've got a situation developing in the South China Sea. Multiple bogies, unknown origin, and they're using technology we've never seen before. Our pilots can't get a read on them." Through her peripheral vision, she noticed her yacht's crew, hand-picked former military personnel, subtly shifting positions. They'd heard the tone change. They knew. "Sir, with all due respect, I'm out of the service. Have been for 2 years. My flying days are—" "Negative." The word cut through her protest like a blade. "You're still on the reserve list, Commander, and right now, you're the only pilot we have who's faced the impossible and lived to tell about it." She stood slowly, designer fabric fluttering in the ocean breeze, and walked to the yacht's edge. In the distance, she could see them, 4 military helicopters approaching in perfect formation, their black silhouettes growing larger against the morning sky. SEALs, coming for her. "They gave me a call sign once," she said quietly into the phone, watching the helicopters close the distance. "Want to know what it was?" "We know your call sign, Commander. That's exactly why we need you." The lead helicopter was close enough now that she could see the faces behind the visors, could see the respect in their posture even from this distance. These weren't men coming to retrieve a reluctant reserve officer. These were warriors coming to collect a legend. She closed her eyes and felt the familiar weight of responsibility settling across her shoulders like an old flight jacket. When she opened them again, the Billionaire was gone. In her place stood Commander Zara Ghost Akaffer, and the sky was calling her home. The yacht's engines had already begun to turn, heading toward the rendezvous point her crew had been monitoring on encrypted channels. They'd known this day would come. They'd all known. The war everyone thought was over had just begun again, and the woman who'd made a fortune in tech after leaving the service was about to remember why they'd called her the deadliest pilot in the sky. The helicopters settled into formation around Serenity's Edge, and Ghost allowed herself one last look at the peaceful horizon before everything changed forever. Her phone buzzed again. This time it was a different voice, younger, uncertain, afraid. "Ma'am, I'm Lieutenant Torres, stationed at—" "I know where you're stationed, Lieutenant," Ghost said, already moving toward the helicopter that had landed on her yacht's pad. "I helped design the flight protocols you're using. Now tell me what's out there that's got everyone so scared." The pause stretched long enough for her to strap into the helicopter's jump seat, accepting the headset handed to her by a SEAL whose face she recognized from Baghdad. Staff Sergeant Martinez nodded once, a greeting between old warriors who'd shared impossible missions. "Ma'am," Tor's voice crackled through static, "they're moving in ways that shouldn't be possible. 90-degree turns at Mach speeds, hovering at altitudes that would crush our aircraft, and they're completely silent." Ghost felt her blood cool. She'd encountered silent aircraft before, in classified missions that officially never happened. The technology required was decades beyond anything currently in service, and the implications were staggering. Someone had made a quantum leap in aerospace engineering, and they were testing it in one of the most volatile regions on Earth. How many? She asked, slipping into the mindset that had made her legendary, calm, precise, deadly. 12 confirmed, possibly more. They appeared on radar simultaneously at 600 hours, then vanished for 40 minutes before reappearing in completely different positions. Our satellites show nothing. It's like they can control what we see. The helicopter banked hard toward the USS Gerald Ford, which Ghost could now see on the horizon, a floating city of American military might, bristling with aircraft and alive with purposeful motion. But even from this distance, she could sense the tension radiating from the carrier. This wasn't routine deployment. This was barely controlled panic wrapped in military discipline. "Commander," Martinez spoke for the first time, his voice carrying the weight of shared history. "Good to have you back." Ghost nodded, watching the carrier grow larger. "How's my bird?" "Modified and waiting. New systems you designed are finally operational." Martinez smiled grimly. "Though I'm betting you never thought you'd be the one testing them in combat." She had designed those systems during long nights in her Silicon Valley offices, applying lessons learned from missions that would remain classified for decades. Advanced avionics, stealth capabilities, and weapons systems that pushed the boundaries of physics. She'd built them for the military she'd left behind, never imagining she'd return to use them herself. But as the helicopter settled onto the carrier's deck and she saw the faces of the crew, young, determined, scared, Ghost realized she'd never really left. She'd just been waiting for the war to find her again. The carrier's island tower loomed above them, communications arrays spinning frantically as they tracked threats that shouldn't exist. Somewhere in the South China Sea, 12 impossible aircraft were waiting, and Commander Zara Ghost Okafor was the only pilot alive who might understand what they were facing. The ocean stretched endlessly in all directions, holding secrets that were about to surface. Ghost stepped onto the carrier deck and felt the familiar vibration of a ship at war footing. She was home. Admiral Harrison stood at the edge of the flight deck, his weathered face etched with concern that 2 decades of naval service couldn't hide. He'd called in favors to bring Ghost back, had personally vouched for her security clearance reinstatement, and had spent the last 12 hours defending his decision to a Pentagon that wanted conventional solutions to unconventional problems. "Commander Okafor," he said, extending his hand as she approached, "thank you for coming." "Sir," Ghost's grip was firm, her eyes already scanning the flight deck with professional assessment. "I see you've made some modifications to my old playground." The carrier hummed with activity unlike anything she'd experienced during her active service. New aircraft sat in precise rows, their lines unfamiliar but somehow organic, as if they'd evolved rather than been designed. Maintenance crews moved with the efficiency of pit crews, every motion purposeful and quick. "Your designs," Harrison said, following her gaze, "implemented exactly as you specified. The F-35 Ghost variants are operational, along with the drone swarm protocols you developed. Though I have to ask, did you know something like this was coming when you designed them?" Ghost considered the question as they walked toward the island structure. 2 years ago, when she'd been developing next-generation fighter concepts for the defense contractor that had made her wealthy, she'd incorporated capabilities that seemed almost paranoid in their scope. Anti-jamming systems, quantum radar, and maneuverability profiles that assumed enemy aircraft could perform impossible maneuvers. "I designed them for threats that didn't exist yet," she said finally. "Turns out I was right to be paranoid." They entered the carrier's Combat Information Center, where dozens of personnel monitored screens displaying a tactical situation that defied logic. The South China Sea showed as a vast blue expanse dotted with friendly contacts, ships from 7 different navies conducting what was supposed to be a routine freedom of navigation exercise. But overlaid on the peaceful scene were intermittent contacts that appeared and vanished like ghosts, following flight patterns that violated everything known about aerodynamics. "Brief me," Ghost said, settling into a chair that felt familiar despite years away. "Everything." Captain Sarah Webb, the carrier's air wing commander, stepped forward with the crisp efficiency of someone accustomed to briefing senior officers. At 600 local time, 12 aircraft appeared simultaneously on radar across a 200-mile radius. Initial assessment was system malfunction. No aircraft can achieve those positions that quickly. Ghost studied the tactical display, her mind automatically calculating speeds, vectors, and impossibilities. "What changed your assessment?" "Visual confirmation. Pilots from 3 different nations reported seeing them. Triangular aircraft, approximately 60 feet wingspan, completely silent, performing maneuvers that would generate G-forces fatal to any known pilot." Webb paused. "They're also invisible to most of our sensors. We can only track them when they want to be seen." The implications hit Ghost like a physical blow. Someone had achieved aerospace superiority using technology that shouldn't exist. Worse, they were demonstrating it in international waters, making a statement that couldn't be ignored. Every military force in the region was being shown how obsolete their capabilities had become. "Have they made contact?" Ghost asked. "Any communication attempts?" "Negative. They appear, perform maneuvers that shouldn't be possible, then vanish. It's like they're—" Webb searched for the right word. "Testing us," Ghost finished. "Seeing how we react, measuring our capabilities." She stood and walked to the tactical display, studying the pattern of appearances. There was intelligence behind it, strategy. "They're mapping our response protocols." Admiral Harrison joined her at the display. "Which is why we need you airborne. Your aircraft can match their stealth capabilities, and you have experience with unconventional threats." Ghost nodded, but her mind was racing through possibilities that chilled her. During her classified missions, she'd encountered technology that pushed boundaries, but nothing like this. This was a quantum leap beyond anything in development by any known military force. Either someone had made breakthrough discoveries in physics, or— "Sir," a communications officer called out, voice tight with tension. "We're receiving a transmission on emergency frequencies. Multiple languages, but the message is the same." "Put it through," Harrison ordered. The voice that filled the CIC was artificial, synthesized, carrying no trace of human origin. "Military forces of Earth, you have been observed. Your capabilities have been measured. Withdraw from these waters within 12 hours or face consequences you cannot comprehend. This is your only warning." Silence stretched across the combat center like a held breath. Ghost felt her pulse quicken, not from fear but from the familiar surge of adrenaline that had defined her military career. This was the moment when everything changed, when careful planning met chaotic reality. "Well," she said quietly, "I guess we know why they needed Ghost back." The tactical display flickered, and for a moment, all 12 contacts appeared simultaneously, a perfect formation surrounding the international fleet. Then they vanished again, leaving only questions and the growing certainty that the world had just changed forever. Ghost looked around the CIC at faces filled with uncertainty and fear, and realized she was looking at the beginning of something that would redefine human understanding of what was possible. She'd spent 2 years building a technology empire, creating wealth beyond imagination. But wealth couldn't shoot down impossible aircraft or protect innocent people from threats beyond comprehension. Only skill could do that. Only experience. Only someone willing to fly into the unknown and face whatever was waiting there. "Admiral," she said, her voice carrying the quiet authority that had made her legendary, "I need to see my bird." Ghost's F-35 Ghost variant sat in the carrier's hangar like a predator at rest, its angular surfaces absorbing light rather than reflecting it. The aircraft bore little resemblance to standard F-35s. Her modifications had transformed it into something that seemed to have been born from shadows and mathematics. Maintenance crews worked around it with the reverence typically reserved for religious artifacts, each understanding they were preparing a machine that represented the absolute pinnacle of human aerospace engineering. Chief Warrant Officer Jake Wrench Morrison looked up from an engine diagnostic as Ghost approached, his grizzled face breaking into the first genuine smile anyone had seen on the carrier since the crisis began. Morrison had been her crew chief during the classified missions that had forged both their legends, and seeing him here felt like finding a piece of home in an impossible situation. "Ghost," he said, setting down his diagnostic tablet. "Figured you'd show up eventually. This thing's been waiting for you like a faithful dog." She ran her hand along the aircraft's wing, feeling the subtle texture of the stealth coating that had cost more to develop than most nations' annual defense budgets. "How's she handling the modifications?" "Like she was born for them. The quantum radar integration is flawless, and the new propulsion system." Morrison shook his head in admiration. "Ma'am, this aircraft can do things that would make angels jealous." Ghost smiled at the familiar phrase. Morrison had said the same thing about every aircraft she'd ever flown, from her first training jet to the experimental prototypes that had made her reputation. But looking at this machine, she suspected he might finally be understating things. Flight characteristics: Mach 2.5 in stealth configuration, Mach 4 with afterburners engaged, ceiling of 80,000 feet, and the new vectored thrust system gives you maneuverability that'll make your eyeballs sweat. Morrison's expression grew serious. "But Ghost, the power requirements for the new systems mean you've got limited flight time. 2 hours maximum at full capability." She nodded, studying the cockpit that had been modified to accommodate systems that didn't exist when she'd left active service. Neural interface connections, holographic displays, and weapons control systems that bordered on science fiction. Time to full combat readiness: 30 minutes if you're willing to skip the full systems check. "Skip it." Ghost was already moving toward the pilot equipment room. "Whatever's out there has been watching us for hours. Time to return the favor." As she suited up in the advanced flight gear required for her modified aircraft, Ghost felt the familiar transformation that had defined her military career. The civilian persona, successful entrepreneur, tech mogul, billionaire philanthropist, fell away like discarded clothing. In its place emerged the predator who had earned the call sign Ghost, not for her stealth capabilities, but for her ability to appear where enemies least expected her and disappear before they could respond. The flight suit incorporated technology that would have seemed magical just a decade earlier. Biometric monitoring, G-force compensation, and direct neural interface with the aircraft systems. When she sealed the helmet and felt the suit systems come online, Ghost became something more than human, a hybrid of flesh, technology, and deadly purpose. "Ghost, this is Tower," came the voice through her helmet comm as she walked back to her aircraft. "We have updated intelligence. The bogies are moving toward the international fleet. ETA to contact zone is 40 minutes. She felt her pulse steady into the rhythm that had carried her through impossible missions. "Understood, Tower. Ghost is wheels up in 15 minutes. Morrison was completing final checks as she approached the aircraft, his movements carrying the efficiency of someone who had prepared fighters for combat hundreds of times. But Ghost could see the tension in his shoulders, the slight tremor in his hands that betrayed how different this mission was from anything they'd faced before. "Chief," she said, her voice carrying the warmth that had always existed between them despite military protocols. "You've never let me down. Not about to start now, are you?" Morrison looked up from his checklist, and for a moment the professional mask slipped. Ma'am, I've prepped your bird for missions against every enemy on Earth. But this, he gestured toward the tactical displays showing impossible aircraft. I don't know what these things are. Ghost placed her hand on his shoulder, feeling the weight of responsibility that connected every warrior to those who supported them. Neither do I, Chief. But I know one thing, whatever they are, they made a mistake coming here. They're about to learn why nobody messes with humans who have learned to fly. She climbed into the cockpit, feeling the aircraft systems recognize her biometric signature and begin the startup sequence. Around her, displays came alive with information that painted a three-dimensional picture of the tactical situation. The unknown aircraft were converging on the international fleet from multiple directions, their movements coordinated with the precision of a military formation. Ghost, this is Control, Admiral Harrison's voice came through her helmet. You are cleared for immediate launch. Your mission is reconnaissance and assessment. Do not engage unless directly threatened. Understood, Control. Ghost is airborne in 60 seconds. But as her aircraft lifted from the carrier deck and began climbing toward the unknown, Ghost knew that reconnaissance was only the beginning. Somewhere ahead, 12 impossible aircraft were waiting with capabilities that challenged everything humanity thought it knew about flight, and she was about to become the first human pilot to face them in combat. The ocean fell away beneath her as she climbed, and Ghost felt the familiar mix of fear and exhilaration that had defined every important moment of her life. She was going to meet the impossible, armed with nothing but skill, courage, and an aircraft that represented humanity's best effort to reach beyond its limitations. The sky above was empty, but that was about to change. At 30,000 feet, Ghost's aircraft seemed to disappear into the morning sky, its stealth systems rendering it virtually invisible to conventional sensors. But her enhanced displays painted a detailed picture of the airspace around her, showing the locations of friendly aircraft and the ominous empty spaces where the unknown contacts had last appeared. Ghost, Control, we're showing you clean on radar. Stealth systems are fully operational. Confirmed, Control. I'm a hole in the sky. She adjusted her course toward the coordinates where the mysterious aircraft had been detected, her enhanced sensors probing ahead like invisible fingers. Beginning active scan for bogies. The quantum radar system hummed to life, sending out detection pulses that operated on principles barely understood by the scientists who had designed them. Unlike conventional radar, quantum detection couldn't be jammed or fooled by stealth technology. It identified objects by their fundamental effect on local spacetime. If anything was out there, she would find it. Control, Ghost. I'm picking up gravitational anomalies at bearing 270, distance 40 nautical miles. Whatever's out there is massive. Confirmed, Ghost. How massive? She studied the readings, cross-referencing them against every aircraft profile in her computer's memory. The signatures were unlike anything in the database. Control, these readings suggest objects with the mass of heavy bombers but the size of fighters. That's not possible with any known materials. Noted, continue approach but maintain safe distance. Ghost adjusted her flight path, using the terrain-following protocols that had made her famous during classified missions in hostile airspace. Her aircraft hugged the contours of the sky itself, following air currents and pressure gradients that rendered her nearly undetectable even to advanced sensors. At 20 miles from the gravitational anomalies, her threat detection systems began screaming warnings. Multiple radar locks from directions that showed empty sky targeting systems that operated on frequencies beyond human technology. Whatever was out there knew she was coming. Control, I'm being painted by unknown targeting systems. They know I'm here. Ghost, recommend immediate withdrawal. Negative, Control, I'm getting visual contact in 30 seconds. And then she saw them. 12 aircraft hung in the sky ahead like geometric impossibilities, their triangular form seeming to bend light around their edges. They moved with fluid grace that defied physics, banking and turning without the aerodynamic constraints that governed human aircraft. No exhaust plumes, no sound, no indication of how they achieved flight. But what struck Ghost most was their formation, not the rigid precision of military aircraft, but something organic, alive, like a flock of birds that had been transformed into machines of war. Control, I have visual contact with 12 unknown aircraft. They're unlike anything we've ever encountered. Sending video feed now. Through her helmet display, she could see the tactical situation back on the carrier as her video reached them. She imagined the silence in the Combat Information Center, the disbelief as personnel struggled to process what their instruments were telling them. One of the unknown aircraft began moving toward her, accelerating from a dead stop to what her instruments calculated as Mach 3 in less than 2 seconds. The G-forces required for such acceleration would have killed any human pilot instantly. Control, one of them is coming for me, beginning evasive maneuvers. Ghost threw her aircraft into a defensive spiral, pulling G-forces that pushed the limits of human endurance even with her advanced suit. Behind her, the unknown aircraft followed with impossible precision, matching every turn, every climb, every desperate attempt to break contact. But it wasn't attacking, it was studying her. Ghost, Control, your bogey is maintaining distance. Recommend you try to communicate. Switching to emergency frequencies. Ghost keyed her radio to the International Emergency Channel. Unknown aircraft, this is Commander Ackafer, United States Navy. You are operating in international airspace. Identify yourself and state your intentions. The response came not through radio but directly into her consciousness, words that bypassed her ears and appeared fully formed in her mind. You fly well for a primitive. We acknowledge your skill. Ghost felt her blood freeze. Direct neural communication was theoretical technology, decades beyond human capability. Whatever was flying beside her represented a level of advancement that rendered human military technology obsolete. "Who are you?" she transmitted back, not knowing if her thoughts could reach them. "We are what you will become if you survive what is coming. Your species stands at a crossroads, and your response to our presence will determine which path you take." The unknown aircraft suddenly accelerated, disappearing from sight in less than a heartbeat. Ghost found herself alone in empty sky, staring at instruments that showed no trace of the encounter except for her own elevated heart rate and the video recording that proved none of it had been imagination. "Control, bogey has departed. I'm returning to base." Confirmed Ghost, outstanding work. But as she turned toward the carrier, Ghost knew that outstanding work wouldn't be enough for what was coming. Humanity had just made first contact with something far beyond its understanding, and the conversation had begun with a warning wrapped in a demonstration of impossible superiority. The sky seemed different now as she flew home, holding secrets that would change everything. And somewhere in the depths of space, other eyes were watching, waiting to see how humans would respond to the knowledge that they were no longer alone. Ghost's aircraft touched down on the carrier deck with the precision that had defined her entire career. But this time, the familiar thrill of a successful mission was overshadowed by the weight of what she discovered. As the arresting wire brought her to a stop, she could see personnel gathering around the aircraft with expressions that mixed curiosity, fear, and desperate hope that their most legendary pilot might have answers to impossible questions. Admiral Harrison was waiting as she climbed from the cockpit, his weathered face showing none of the relief typically seen after a successful reconnaissance mission. Behind him stood officers from every branch of service represented in the international fleet, along with civilians whose presence suggested involvement from the highest levels of government. "Commander," Harrison said as she removed her helmet, "we need to debrief immediately. What you encountered out there has implications that go far beyond military operations." Ghost nodded, still processing the neural communication that had bypassed every defense she thought she possessed. "Sir, we're dealing with technology that's decades, maybe centuries, ahead of anything we understand. They communicated directly with my mind. No radio, no external signals, just thoughts appearing where they didn't belong." The gathered officers exchanged glances that confirmed what Ghost had suspected. This wasn't just a military crisis. The unknown aircraft represented a paradigm shift that would affect every aspect of human civilization. Dr. Elizabeth Reed, a woman whose presence suggested involvement from the Defense Advanced Research Projects Agency, stepped forward with the urgency of someone accustomed to impossible situations. "Commander, we've been analyzing the video feed from your encounter. The aircraft you encountered are using propulsion systems that violate our understanding of physics. No reaction mass, no exhaust signatures, and acceleration profiles that suggest inertial dampening." "Which means?" Ghost asked, though she suspected she already knew the answer. "Which means," Dr. Reed continued, "that we're not dealing with technology that evolved from human understanding. This is something entirely different, something that suggests—" she paused, choosing her words carefully, "something that suggests we're no longer alone." The implications hit the assembled officers like a shockwave. First contact scenarios had been theoretical exercises, war games played out in Pentagon conference rooms with the assumption that humanity would have decades to prepare. Not 12 hours of warning followed by a demonstration of overwhelming technological superiority. "There's more," Ghost said, knowing that withholding information would serve no one. "They told me that humanity is at a crossroads, that our response to their presence will determine our future path. It wasn't a threat exactly, but it wasn't reassurance either." Admiral Harrison ran his hand through graying hair, a gesture that betrayed how far beyond normal military operations this situation had evolved. "Commander, I've been in contact with the Joint Chiefs and the National Security Council. This is now a matter of global security. Every major power is aware of the situation, and everyone is looking for answers we don't have." "What are my orders, sir?" "That's what we need to determine." Harrison gestured toward the Combat Information Center. "We've got 12 aircraft of unknown origin demonstrating technology we can't match, communicating in ways we don't understand, and making statements about humanity's future that sound like ultimatums. Traditional military responses seem inadequate." Ghost followed the group into the CIC, where the tactical displays now showed a different picture than when she'd left. The unknown aircraft had reappeared, but their formation had changed. Instead of random appearances across the South China Sea, they were now arranged in a perfect circle around the international fleet, maintaining precise distances that suggested they were establishing some form of perimeter. "They're containing us," Ghost realized. "Not attacking, not threatening, but making it clear that they control the tactical situation." Captain Webb approached with updated intelligence that carried implications none of them wanted to acknowledge. "Ma'am, we've received similar reports from naval forces around the globe. Identical aircraft have appeared near major military installations on every continent. They're not just monitoring our response here, they're simultaneously engaging with every major military force on Earth." The scope of the situation was staggering. Coordinated global surveillance suggested an intelligence network and command structure that operated on a scale beyond human comprehension. Whatever they were dealing with had the capability to monitor and respond to human military activities worldwide in real time. "Recommendations," Admiral Harrison asked the assembled officers. The silence stretched uncomfortably as each person grappled with a situation that had no precedent in military history. Traditional responses, escalation, deterrence, strategic positioning, seemed irrelevant when facing technology that rendered human capabilities obsolete. Sir, Ghost said finally, I think we need to consider the possibility that this isn't a military situation, at least not in any conventional sense. Explain. They're not behaving like an invading force. They're behaving like, she searched for the right analogy, like observers, scientists. They're studying us, measuring our responses, collecting data. The question is, what conclusion are they trying to reach? Dr. Reed nodded thoughtfully. That would explain the global coordination. If you're studying a species' military capabilities and decision-making processes, you want to observe their responses under identical conditions worldwide. Which brings us back to the central question, Harrison said. What response are they looking for? What would constitute passing or failing their test? Ghost studied the tactical display, watching the perfect formation of impossible aircraft maintaining their containment of the international fleet. Somewhere in those geometric shapes was an intelligence vast enough to coordinate global operations and advanced enough to travel between stars. And humanity's future might depend on understanding what that intelligence wanted. Sir, she said quietly, I think I need to go back out there. The suggestion landed like a stone in still water, sending ripples of concern through the assembled officers. No one wanted to risk their most capable pilot on another encounter with technology they couldn't understand or counter. Ghost, Admiral Harrison said carefully, you've already done more than anyone could ask. Another encounter might not be as peaceful as the first. With respect, sir, I don't think we have a choice. They're waiting for something, and every minute we delay might be moving us closer to failing whatever test they've designed. Ghost met his eyes with the steady gaze that had convinced commanders to approve impossible missions throughout her career. They communicated with me once. Maybe they'll do it again. Maybe this time I can get answers instead of questions. Ghost suited up for her second encounter with the impossible, her hands moving through pre-flight checks with the automatic precision of thousands of hours in military cockpits. But this time felt different. The weight of responsibility extended far beyond military objectives or national security. This time, she was preparing to represent the entire human species in a conversation that could determine civilization's future. Chief Morrison worked beside her with the focused intensity of someone preparing equipment for a mission that had no precedent in human experience. His usual stream of technical commentary had been replaced by thoughtful silence broken only by the essential communications required for combat preparation. Ghost, he said as she sealed her helmet, I've been thinking about what you said, about them studying us. He paused, choosing his words carefully. What if they're not just measuring our military capabilities? What if they're measuring our character? The observation struck her with surprising force. Throughout her career, Ghost had faced enemies who wanted to defeat human forces, destroy human assets, or capture human territory. But she'd never faced an intelligence that might be evaluating humanity's worthiness to survive. Chief, that's either the most terrifying or most hopeful thought I've heard all day. Ma'am, I'm not sure there's a difference anymore. Ghost climbed into her aircraft, feeling the systems recognize her biometric signature and begin their startup sequences. Around her, displays painted a tactical picture that showed the unknown aircraft maintaining their perfect perimeter, neither advancing nor retreating, simply waiting with the patience of entities that might measure time in geological epochs rather than human lifespans. Ghost Control, you are cleared for immediate launch. Your mission parameters are unchanged. Establish communication and determine intentions. But Commander, Admiral Harrison's voice carried weight that transcended military protocol. Remember that you're not just representing the Navy or the United States out there. You're representing all of us. Understood, Control. Ghost is airborne. Her aircraft lifted from the carrier deck and began climbing toward the unknown, but this time Ghost felt a different kind of anticipation. The first encounter had been about surviving contact with superior technology. This encounter was about proving that humanity deserved to survive at all. At 20,000 feet, her quantum radar began detecting the gravitational anomalies that marked the presence of the unknown aircraft. But the signatures were different now, more focused, more intentional, as if the aircraft had been reconfigured for a specific purpose. Control, I'm picking up modified signatures from the bogies. They're arranged in a new formation. Confirmed, Ghost. We're tracking the changes. They began repositioning the moment you left the deck. Ghost adjusted her approach vector, nodding that the unknown aircraft had arranged themselves into what appeared to be a corridor, a clear path that led toward a single contact holding position at the center of their formation. An invitation that was also a demonstration of absolute control over the tactical situation. Control, they're directing my approach. I'm following the corridor they've established. Ghost, maintain caution. You're entering unknown parameters. At 10 miles from the central contact, Ghost's threat detection systems fell silent. Not because they detected no threats, but because they detected something so far beyond their programming parameters that they simply stopped functioning. Her aircraft was flying through space controlled by physics that human science couldn't analyze or understand. And then she was face to face with it. The aircraft waiting for her was larger than the others, perhaps 100 feet across, its surfaces seeming to flow like liquid metal despite maintaining perfect geometric precision. It hung motionless in the sky without any visible means of support, a technological miracle that rendered human aerospace engineering obsolete by comparison. Words appeared in her mind without preamble. You returned. This shows courage or perhaps desperation. We will determine which. I returned because my species needs answers, Ghost transmitted back, hoping her thoughts could reach the intelligence controlling the impossible aircraft. You said we're at a crossroads. Help us understand what choice we're being asked to make. Your species has developed the capability to travel beyond your birth world, but also the capability to destroy yourselves before achieving that potential. We are here to determine which path you will choose. Ghost felt her pulse quicken as the full scope of the situation became clear. This wasn't first contact in any conventional sense. This was an evaluation, a test administered by intelligences that had watched countless species face the same crossroads. Some had passed and joined a larger galactic community. Others had failed and vanished into extinction. What do you need to see from us? We need to see how you respond when faced with absolute disadvantage. Do you react with wisdom or aggression? Do you seek understanding or attempt domination? Your military forces are analyzing our technology, seeking weaknesses to exploit. This is expected, but some among you are also seeking communication and cooperation. This gives us hope. The unknown aircraft began moving, not away but closer, until Ghost could see details that human eyes had never witnessed. The surface wasn't metal or any conventional material, but something that seemed to exist in multiple dimensions simultaneously, solid and fluid, present and absent, real and impossible. Your species stands where we once stood, the voice continued. Where thousands of species have stood, most choose poorly and are consumed by their own power. A few choose wisely and are welcomed into something greater than they imagined possible. How do we choose wisely? By proving that advancement of technology does not require abandonment of wisdom. By showing that the desire for knowledge is stronger than the desire for dominance. By demonstrating that you can face the unknown with curiosity rather than hostility. Ghost understood now why she'd been chosen for this mission. Her career had been defined not by the enemies she'd defeated, but by the impossible situations she'd navigated through skill, courage, and most importantly, the wisdom to know when fighting was necessary and when understanding was more important. What happens next? That depends on the choices your leaders make in the coming hours. We will observe, we will measure, and we will decide whether humanity is ready to learn that the universe is vast, ancient, and filled with wonders beyond your current comprehension. The unknown aircraft began to withdraw, its impossible form becoming translucent as it prepared to vanish entirely. But the voice remained clear in Ghost's mind. "Fly well, Commander Akafor. The future of your species may depend on how well you can help them understand what you have learned today." And then she was alone again, staring at empty sky while her instruments insisted that nothing had ever been there. But Ghost carried with her the weight of knowledge that would change everything. Humanity was being tested, and the examination was far from over. The flight back to the carrier gave Ghost time to process the implications of what she'd learned, but no time was sufficient to fully comprehend the magnitude of the situation. Humanity had been contacted by an intelligence so advanced that their technology seemed like magic, and that contact had come in.